would this be, Emily? Episode 9? Thank you very much for coming on. Kandi Krush Wyatt, she is a professional Canadian boxer who won the WBA Intercontinental Welterweight title in March 2023. She claimed the title in a split decision victory against Christy Bavington, and marking a significant comeback after a 15-month break from the ring. Prior to this, Wyatt faced tough competition, including several title shots, one including the undisputed welterweight championship in 2021. She currently holds a career record of 12 wins, 6 losses, 3 wins by knockout. Her resilience and dedication are evident, especially as she competed for world titles multiple times across different weight classes. Thank you for coming out to the Solo Spotlight. I can't wait to focus on your journey, your mindset, and how you prepare for all these high-stakes matches. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. Thank you for having me. I'm excited. It's just fun to connect with you through Emily.
Yeah,
right? How those past relationships can just come full circle. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It's very fun. And when I started dating Emily, it was one of those things like, get me in contact with all your cool friends. What do they do? So I'm always trying to get her to be like, oh, who do you have on? She knows this guy who's a chef, and he was a boxer, and all these different people. So then I'm like, this is cool. It's a double whammy. God love Emily. So I want to get into first starting off, getting into boxing. When did you start? Was this like a family legacy thing, or how'd you get in touch with this hobby or career?
Career?
Yeah.
I stumbled upon it when I was 8 years old.
Oh, wow.
My family moved to Rocky Mountain House, and I was always an active kid. Being in sport and activity is always something that's been important in my family. And so I was, even at 8 years old, I wasn't a stranger to sport and activity. I was in gymnastics before I went into boxing.
Okay.
The gymnastics club and the boxing club were in the same building.
Right.
But there was no wall that separated us so we could watch each other train.
Right.
I remember looking over to the boxing side, hearing them hit the bag, hit the pads, and the sparring. And I just, something just drew me to it. And I was like, this looks like a lot of fun. So I just wandered over there. That's cool. 8 years old.
Yeah, you
were like, coach, can I try this?
Yeah, you're
and
like,
then asked my parents, and they're like, okay, yeah.
I used to do boxing when I was young. For a couple years, I was doing one sport with a friend, and he's, you should try boxing. And then I did it, got my ass kicked. And in one fight, got my ass kicked by this super lanky Newfoundlander. And then I was like, I don't know if I want to come back here. But
I cried the first time I got punched in the face.
It's very daunting. I was on a very amateur low level, and it was the lights, the crowds, the whole idea. Even this past event on Friday, was it? Yeah, Friday. They were a wicked promotion, Alliance Boxing. We definitely missed you, but we hope to catch you on your next event. When you first got into boxing, was something that you considered? Were you like, okay, I can see myself doing this and competing at a very high level? Or, because some people, they go, I just want to train and I have no intention of fighting. Where did that lie with you? When did that change for you of, I really want to sink into this?
Well, I started training when I was 8. And when I was probably 10, my boxing coach gave me an article from, I'm pretty sure it was from Time magazine. And it was featuring Christy Martin, the coal miner's daughter.
Okay.
In the 90s and early 2000s, Christy Martin was the face of women's boxing.
Okay.
Just him giving me that article and saying, hey, this is where you can take this if you want. And even out of my gym, at the time I was training out of the Rocky Titans Boxing Club.
Right.
I wasn't even allowed to compete as an amateur because I wasn't old enough.
Okay.
You have to be 11 years old to compete. Yeah. So I think my coach giving me that article at that young age, I'd actually have to talk to him about it to get some clarification, but I think that was his way of helping keep me engaged in the sport. Because by that time I'd already been training with him for 2 years.
Yeah, and it seems like a good match, right? So from from 8 to 11, and 11, I'm assuming you had your first amateur fight.
Yep, 11 years old.
So 11, and it's interesting too, because I have another friend that I interview as well, and he just had his second amateur MMA fight. And one of the questions that I asked was like, it's interesting talking to you because you've already went through this. So I asked him, like, how many amateur fights, like, how do you gauge? Because there's not really, but when did you do all these amateur fights, and was there a rubric of like, I need to do X amount of amateur fights before I go pro?
Yeah, boxing there is no prerequisite to turning pro with you have to be 18 years old. But yeah, there is no
clean bill of health.
You don't have to have any amateur experience. I have that advantage of having a lot of amateur experience, and then as I was a kid, when continuing to progress in the sport, my fights at a local level. And then I was winning fights at provincials and winning all my fights at the provincial tournaments. And then I would progress to nationals, and I was winning nationals. I retired as an amateur as a 6-time Canadian national champion.
Right.
Yeah. And then when I was 19 years old, I made Team Canada.
Right.
As an amateur. So, and as I was progressing, I still had these goals that I wanted to achieve.
Right.
As an amateur athlete, knowing in my mind that I did eventually want to turn pro one day.
And once you make the move, can you go back and forth, or once you go pro, you can't do amateur ever again?
Or it's probably it's a weird question because it's a yes and no type question. Mm-hmm. So me, where I'm at in my professional career, I wouldn't be able to retain my amateur status again. But Boxing Canada, and I can't speak for other countries, but Boxing Canada now has an Olympic pathway for professional fighters. I read the pathway, but I wasn't interested in doing it, so I didn't really
you were like, I'm not going to do this.
Information. Yeah. There is this option now for Canadian professional fighters. If they would like, they can take this Olympic pathway through Boxing Canada to qualify for the Olympics, which is an amateur tournament.
Okay. Huh.
But that is the only amateur tournament that Canadian
and it's almost just like a loophole in case they're missing, like in case they run out of a talent pool in the amateur division, that they're like, hey, if you're a pro and you still want to box for the country, come on.
Like at the end of the day with the Olympics, we want our athletes to medal. We want our athletes to come back with a medal. And even if they don't, that's not make or break.
Even the level of accomplishment, when you look at it and you say the level of accomplishment, making it to that stage, the fact that you even did it once is because the level of faith,
commitment,
a level of commitment, the level of training, the level of preparation, because you're the only person in there. When someone's hammering you hard and they have you against the side, you're the only one going to rely on your technique to get yourself out of there.
Oh, absolutely. Before the fight starts and everything leading up to it, you just need to trust your training. As athletes, we know in our hearts if we prepared well enough for this fight. Right. We know if we are prepared physically and mentally.
Yeah.
If both of those aren't at 100%, you're gonna see it in the fight. But when they're both at 100%, you just need to step through the ropes and trust your training.
Exactly, and that's the big thing, especially when you get at like a stage like this where it's like the level of competition's so high, where it's like there's no room for mistakes.
But at the same time, this is professional competitive sports. Somebody has to lose. And that's okay. We train to win. So when you don't win, it is disappointing. But if you are 100% prepared physically and mentally, and you still lose, there's nothing to hang your head up.
The next thing I was going to say is, how long did you go undefeated? What did that look like?
Yeah, like I went undefeated for my first 8 fights. My first world title attempt in Greece against Christina Lenardotau. So that being said, my first loss being a world title fight took a lot of the sting.
Yeah, because you're like, I made it to the summit.
When you lose at the highest level, it does take a lot of sting out of a loss. But at the same time, you do learn a lot more from a loss, because a loss forces you to look at the weaknesses in your training fighting. Whereas
if you're winning,
you ride the high a little bit. Some people can get complacent and be like, what I'm doing is working because I'm undefeated, so why would I change anything? Mm-hmm. Boxing is constantly evolving, even in the fights. Round to round, your opponent is adapting and trying to change their game plan.
Right.
to get the best of you. If you don't add any tools to your toolbox in between fights, eventually people are going to figure you out and design their game plan around that. So when it comes to the pressures of being undefeated, any athletes that are still out there that are undefeated, don't let it get to you. Just continue to learn, be a student of the game, add as many tools to your toolbox as you possibly can. Losing a fight is not the end of the world.
Right. And another thing, referencing back to that card and that promote, because I think it has somewhat of a similarity, something we can both reference together. Another thing that I saw was the people that took it, not that all the fighters took it seriously, but there was a level of showboating. And I want to get your take on that. Do you see that a lot in the female? How much does that have? Because I saw it a lot more with the males than I did where a guy was dropping his hands or doing the Muhammad Ali shuffle or whatever it is. Is this a mental tactic or is this guy just an asshole?
Sometimes it can be a little bit of both. And whether it's male or female, sometimes the athlete's just a dick.
That's what I thought. I was like, I think this guy's
and other
just
times it is. Maybe the one thing I've noticed when it comes to showboating, more so in the female side of it, because I'm starting to see a little bit more of it, which is actually nice because it adds to it, right? Like it brings people in. Because at the end of the day, professional boxing is a show. It's entertainment.
And that's one thing I said to Emily was, I was like, they let you allow it to a certain extent because it is entertainment, right? So if this was just both guys kept their head down and it was just like jabs, they're trying to create like some sort of like they're trying to create that so people are more enticed. So you get that idea of the business things.
Well, and that's as the fighter too. You can't let stuff like that get to you because the number one rule in boxing is to protect yourself at all times. So when you see these fighters that are showboating a little bit, I hope that these athletes are 100% solid in their boxing fundamentals that will get them out of a dangerous situation they may put themselves in because of showboating.
Right. And then the thing is, it's all fine and dandy when you're knocking dudes out. I don't know. Do you follow much of UFC?
I don't, actually.
Sean O'Malley, very famous, super showboaty, and then he went into this last fight and just got out-wrestled. So it was like, oh, everything's fine, and you can be cocky when it works, but then when it doesn't work, now we got an issue, right?
Because we all have a plan until we get punched in the face.
Yeah, exactly. So, where'd your nickname come from? So how'd you get this nickname? Was it self-appointed, or was it given by...
My strength and conditioning coach came up with this name, and it's purely because of the phone game.
Oh, Candy Crush.
I was like, you have the game Candy Crush on your phone? And I'm like, no, why? You should have your nickname should be Candy Crush. And he's like, and then you should put it on your phone and try to create a relationship between me and Candy Crush. Which I was like, Candy Crush, it's got a good ring.
Yeah,
so
it matches. It all makes sense.
Yeah.
As soon as I said it, I was like, oh, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
And then going on strength and conditioning, like when you're deciding, how many times would you say is a reasonable amount that you want to fight a year? Like in a calendar year, how many times are you training to fight? Quarterly, once a year, twice a year? Take us through that.
I've had a very busy 2024. I've had 3 fights already, and I've loved it. So 3 to 4 fights a year is my idea.
Once every 3-4 months, depending on how it works out.
In my personal experience for my career, it's always been pretty solid with my promoters. When fighting for world titles, it was like, no, this is who you're going to fight. And it wouldn't change. There's been a few instances in my career leading up to the fight, I thought I was fighting one person, and then
last minute,
2 to 4 weeks out, the promoter calls me and says, hey, we had them drop out, but working on a replacement type thing. I was the replacement fight for the Jessica McCaskill.
Oh, okay.
I took that fight on a week.
That's crazy. Would you say that the way you train, are you just always training to be ready? Or if you have a camp date, is that, at October 1st is like start a camp and this is the regimen for the 3 months? Or is it like, I'm just consistently like in the gym training to always be ready? Do you have hard on and off switches of after you have a fight? Is it like a couple weeks off the gym? Or some people have a fight on Friday and they're back in the gym on a Sunday?
Anytime I have a scheduled fight, I'll go into a 6 to 8 week training camp, training heavily, sometimes twice a day. After that fight is finished, I'll take a full week off training. I won't even go to the gym. Then after that week of rest and relaxation and just to recharge and to get the brain out of thinking about boxing and competing all the time.
You also have to have like a balanced social life and stuff like that.
Way of thinking is really beneficial when you're in camp, because when you're in camp preparing for a fight, that's the only thing you want to think about. But yeah, after the fight, then I like to just shut it off for a little bit, go socialize with friends. I like to hike, paddleboard. But when I'm in camp, I am not doing those things. So when I'm on my time off, that's when I'll go do
you reap
those things.
Yeah.
So.
And I know a little bit more about like the MMA side, just from what I've experienced and what I've watched. But I'm also interested to know of what's the, like, when it comes to like fighter camps, do you have a lot of like your own training partners at the gym that they follow you for a camp and you follow them for their camp? And like, how does that look like? Do you find yourself like also propping up other fighters? Or is it more a solo journey? Like, how does that look like?
Yeah, mine is definitely a solo journey as a pro here in Calgary. So when I'm in camp, I'm working with my boxing coach. I'm working with my strength and conditioning coach. But then like the boxing community within Calgary and Alberta, especially for sparring, there's a couple women here in Calgary that I've asked them for sparring for my training camps, and they've sparred with me consistently throughout my whole training camp, and they're amateur fighters. So it benefits them as well if they're also preparing for anything. So that's usually how my camps go. Like all the camps. I'm definitely open to the idea. Just haven't done it yet.
And it might be sometimes it has to do with the promotion. Sometimes it has to do, we only have a minute left and then I'm going to restart this. I don't know if it's just going to boot me out, Emily said.
You could do that.
It's really, I always find it very interesting when you look at people punching each other in the face and how many different degrees of like disciplines and stuff. Like with boxing, because what I like to mention to people is like, when you learn about anything, it's like you're slowly entering a matrix. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like when you started boxing, everything's just going like this, mile a minute. And then year after year, you're like, oh, I saw how she planted her foot this way. Or I saw that she's always dropping her hand after she throws a right. So then I tell people it's like you're becoming like Neo in the Matrix, right? Everything starts to slow down. You start to, and are you able to like almost categorize different things? And have you seen like different fighter styles? And are there like archetypes for boxing?
There's definitely those types of archetypes where you'll have the brawler, the counterpuncher, the dancer, the one that's super light on their feet. Like
you can't
those ones are. Yeah, you literally can't get them to sit still to throw punches at them. Those ones are super frustrating to fight.
Yeah, you're like, how are you always behind me?
Or it's just, why can't I hit you? I literally can't get you to plant your feet long enough for me to punch you. Do some sort of damage, or that's going to get the judge's attention.
And what would you consider your archetype? What would you consider your fighting style?
Yeah, so my style has definitely adapted and changed over the years. I've always been a very aggressive fighter that likes to go forward. I am not afraid to get hit. I've been described as durable a lot in this sport, which is it's a good thing,
compliment,
but at the same time,
sure.
Like it's a great thing to be durable, but it can't be your number one advantage. Type thing.
Because do you think that could affect like your longevity?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like you can only take so many hits to the melon before it's like, okay, this is a good tactic, but maybe it's not as medically considerate as
it's not ideal. Like the whole point of boxing is to hit somebody and not get hit.
Exactly.
So yes, I am durable. I still am durable, even though my style I've been able to refine my style, especially within the last 3 years.
Okay.
I am still I would consider myself an aggressive forward. I always like to move forward type fighter, but I'm getting better at learning how to give up a little bit of ground for certain reasons, right? Like making giving up ground as part of my strategy,
It becomes
right?
more of a
To
chess
set
match.
or to counter punch. Yeah, and make it more of a chess match.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's probably like experience, right? You can slowing it down. It's probably something that you never considered before, but then just time in the ring and like busting out rounds.
A lot of it is just, yes, the more time you put into the gym in the ring, then a lot of those skills you've been working on and your fundamentals, just the more time you put in, they're eventually just going to become second nature.
Right.
So you're not thinking about them so much. And I think that is what really helps contribute to things slowing down.
Right.
Because it's not necessarily that things are slowing down. It's just that you're thinking about less things.
Yes.
Because the more time you put in, then you're like, okay, I don't have to worry about making sure my weight is in the center. I don't have to worry about making sure my left hand is right above my shoulder. Because after so many years, like you just know your left hand's above your shoulder and you feel the balance in your body and it's just, like I said, it just becomes second nature.
And I want to come back to one thing because I also found it interesting because we're talking about like training and community and stuff like that. When did you go from a like smaller like Rocky Mountain house? Did you ever feel like you were like where your training location at, like you weren't in a spot that was going to give you the most opportunity, if that makes sense? Like I always say, like in Nova Scotia, like they have this new Fight League Atlantic, and I'm so glad that they were able to get that, because what opportunities did fighters out of the Atlantic province have to show their skills? So like a lot of these guys and girls were like living in rural areas, and then they would go move to Halifax or they would go move to like bigger cities because you're opening yourself up to this huge wealth of, you just have more population. So like the level of talent and the density and stuff is to your advantage, that you're going to get way more exposure. But did you find that benefited you at all, or like how did that look like?
Yeah, so my career took that exact route, starting as an amateur. So I had the same boxing coach from ages 8 to 18.
Right.
And then when I was 18 and I made the 19, actually. So then I had made the national team. And then I had this next goal of trying to qualify for the 2012 Olympics. And my boxing coach at the time told me, I cannot take you there. He was 100% honest with me. I cannot take you to the Olympics. So we need to send you somewhere where the coaches can. And that is what prompted my move to Edmonton.
Right.
And I trained at Edmonton for 5 years, and then I turned pro. Mm-hmm. And then my move down to Calgary was motivated by a coach. Yeah, again, I just wasn't happy in Edmonton anymore with my situation in boxing and in life. So I was like, I just need to change the scenery.
Yeah.
And there was a coach down in Calgary that I've known for a very long time, and I knew he could help me out with my pro career. So that's what prompted the move to Calgary. But yeah, any athlete out there that has dreams or goals of going to the top of whatever sport it is, one, you really need to make sure the coaches you have can get you there. And if they can't, that they would be willing to let you go.
Yeah, and that must be
to coaches that can get you there. Because that's a big thing too. There are some coaches and athletes out there, they think that they can get there. We can do it. And you're like, I don't think you can.
Yeah.
You need to get rid of your ego and know that you need to go. If you need to go somewhere to better yourself, go. And then same with coaches. If you have an athlete that you think or they think they can go to the next level and you can't take them there, you need to be willing to let them go.
And now, what does that advance been in terms of like training environment? What does that look like in terms of going into the gym, you coming to Edmonton? Is it just more like one-on-one coaching time? Is it like accessible, like things around you in the area? Is it the level? What exactly is it that was like something that stood out for you that you never felt like you were getting in that small community?
A lot of it, and especially in the amateur thing, coaches progress just like athletes, right? There's levels of coaching. Like in boxing, it's I think it's 1 through 3 now. It's changed. But like my personal coach that I had for my first 11 years of my career, he was a level 1 boxing coach.
Okay.
And he knew that he couldn't put in the time that it was going to take to become a level 2 or a level 3 boxing coach to be able to continue to train with me and progress me.
So would he
to the
even
level
be allowed
that
to corner you?
At certain tournaments, he wouldn't. Like if I was competing when I was competing internationally,
Yeah.
my personal hometown boxing coach couldn't come with me because he wasn't qualified.
Right.
Right? Like it's no different than all the athletes that don't qualify for international tournaments.
When you look at like coaches for like other leagues as well, like when you look at like soccer or whatever, if I have like my C license, I can coach ages 4 to 10, and then I need because it's theoretically like you're following that level of experience. So it's probably
it's the same in amateur boxing,
right? Whereas you don't want to muddy the waters, or you don't want to have someone in there that's like preaching the wrong. You know what I mean? It can almost really screw up like the skill level if like you have people in there that don't know what they're doing. And when you look at a combat sport, it's like how many times do people like hire their friends to train them and shit, and then all of a sudden they're doing these like super holistic approaches, and you're like, oh, you have no idea. You see it in combat sports a lot where they're like, oh, like my friend can it's not a big deal, but it's no, like there is some like level of responsibility where it's like, oh, like I need to make sure that I'm doing everything to put this person in like the right mindset,
exactly.
Right?
And whether like on the professional side of it, like professional fighters, we still need fundamental training, right? If you're like a up and coming professional athlete, make sure you find yourself a coach that is going to instill fundamental skills,
right,
and drill you in your fundamental skills, because those need to be worked on every single day. Don't ever think that you're too good for fundamentals, because they need to be done every day. Look for a coach that really focuses on fundamentals, because then once you have your fundamentals, your style comes after. You need to be solid in your fundamentals before you can develop your own style.
It's really funny while you're saying that. I remember hearing this quote. Do you know who the wrestler is, John Cena?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he said he always has this engraved spoon. And essentially, like on one end of the spoon, it says, give yourself the credit when you think you're not enough. But also, like, remind yourself, too, that, like, you're not above anybody else, right? So it's one of those things, too, where you still have to go back to the basics every once in a while. You also need to have enough expectation in yourself that you're not going into a fight being like, oh, this person's so much better than me, or I didn't train this or I didn't train that. But it's also not going in and being like, I'm gonna fucking kill this bitch. So it's a huge balance. And I think when you look at these solo sports, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the biggest challenges is being able to measure that ego. And it's not only are you having the balance with how much you're training and your relationship with your coaches and whatever it is, but it's, okay, I don't want to sell myself too short and make these people think that they're going to walk all over me. But I also don't want to talk too much shit and then get knocked out.
When you climb through the ropes, you do just have to trust your training.
Yeah. That's really cool. And it seems like you have a very good, solid foundation, which I think that kind of speaks a lot to successful athletes and stuff like that, is the level of foundation, also the level of introspectiveness, where a lot of people, they let everything happen and they're just there to fight and it is what it is, where it seems like you're taking it in and you're observing it and gaining a good understanding of it. I think that ultimately can better inform your decisions in the future. Was this your first time in the UK, or have you been there multiple times?
For Kirsty Babington, that was my first. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I've fought in the UK twice now. Yeah. I fought in Wolverhampton, and then I fought in Manchester later in July of last year.
Did you see any soccer games?
100%. Sorry?
Did you see any soccer games?
I did not. No.
See, that's on my bucket
list. But 100% would go back again. Like, fighting in the UK is so much fun, because they're a boxing country.
Yeah.
They love it there. Like, after the Babington fight, my team and I were like leaving the venue to go, and I'm like just going through the stands, and there's this little girl standing there with her mom.
Yeah.
And I didn't think anything of it. I just looked at her and was like, oh, hey. And then I kept walking. But then my coach like taps me on the shoulder, and he's like, no, she wants a picture with you.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Oh, okay. Didn't even think about it. I was just like, oh, there's some little girl at the fight school. But I'm like, no, like she came to watch. There was I think there was 2 or 3 female fights on that show.
Yeah.
And I wanted to come watch the women box.
Yeah.
And then she wanted my picture with me after.
It's pretty inspiring.
Yeah, it was cool. So the UK is it's more of a boxing country than Canada is. I will say it. Canada is not a boxing country. It never really has been. But we have hockey, and there's nothing wrong with hockey.
And you can see that the fight scene is like steady developing as well. And especially when you look at females in boxing or just females in any combat sport, like the immersion of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and how that looks now, where people are actually going in tournaments for money. And this is probably like never would have seen 10 years ago. And it's just because people like you are championing the sport and allowing it to get to these levels where there's a level of representation where they can look and say, oh, it's actually possible. And this is a roadmap that I can follow like somewhat.
Actually, a big thing I will say I think it hits really well with female athletes, and especially like youth female athletes, is you can't be what you can't see.
Exactly.
So like for me, it was Christy Martin.
Right.
And it was my coach physically showing me like I saw Christy Martin.
And that's the example.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if I can be that for any little girl out there that wants to be a professional boxer, and if all it takes is seeing me do it or seeing any other female fighter do it, I'm like, that's pretty cool.
And you're having fun do it, right? Which is like,
yeah, I'm just a big kid living
which is one of the biggest things too, where like a lot of people they tend to lose that, right? Where it's, even though it's a job and even though you're doing it professionally, this and that, it's like you also still need to like do what you love and have fun doing it. But with that, not everything's fun and you have to like adapt to things. So you had a pretty long break in between, like you had a 15-month break and then you went back in. And did you find taking that break, was that the first time in your career that you took that long of a break? And what kind of like after effects did that have? Was it something that like you were able to say, okay, this was a good break, like this 15 months was definitely needed? Or was it something where like some people, like the longer it takes, like the longer you spend off, the harder it is to come back? So did you ever like juggle with that? Was that ever a thing where it was like a fine line of, oh, if I stay away from this for too long, I might just decide to take, you know what I mean? I might just decide to like early retirement or whatever it is. Right. And then when you did get back into it, what did that look like? Did you have a longer camp? Was it more convincing on your coach's end? Was it more convincing on your end? How did that comeback look like?
So yeah, after the McCaskill fight, I did have that long layoff. Part of it was recovering from the Las Vegas fight. I was suspended for 30 days. So it might have been 90 days.
But knockouts are longer?
And then after, I was experiencing some health issues in that year as well. So that was all like new, kind of figuring out, navigating through all that, getting that dealt with. And then once I got that dealt with, I had told my coaches like, okay, I'm ready. I'm healthy. I'm ready. Let's start thinking another fight for 2023. Mm-hmm. And then we got this offer for Babington, and it was a title fight in the UK. It's a risk. 15-month layoff. You come back to be the opponent in the UK against the hometown girl. But my coaches had watched more film, had done a little bit more studying on her than I had. And they were like, we can do this. Yeah. I think we can do this. And we just took the risk and it paid off. I pulled off the upset.
There you go.
Won the Intercontinental. It was a blast.
That's crazy. And like winning these championships, like it must be like a huge, I don't want to say sigh of relief because it's like you're never done doing it, but in a way you're like, oh, I knew I could get here and I proved myself right. Did you see it as getting to a mountaintop, or was it like this is just another notch in the belt?
No, I was definitely a mountaintop. Like for WBA Intercontinental, I want the belt. I got a belt.
Yeah.
And it is like that motivator. I want more of these because this was cool.
Yeah, because you want to recreate that moment. You're like, whatever I was feeling, like, I want to, like, I used to coach soccer a lot, and I used to tell people, like, whenever they scored a goal, I'd be like, just take a snapshot of that and just remember the feeling that you felt when you walked onto the pitch. Remember the feeling that you felt when you kicked the ball. Like, where'd you kick it? How'd that feel? Like, remember the way your like body language looked like, because that was all like developing like a winning mentality, right? Like, it wasn't the one goal. It was the food you ate before. It was the nutrition. It was how you talked to yourself that day. And you have to encapsulate all of that and be like, okay, this was a really great feeling, but in order to recreate this, I need to make sure that I'm doing like the same type of run up, where you also have to have that perspective of, look how hard it was. And I need to make sure that I put in this amount of effort like every single time. And I can't let myself like slack off. I can't let myself like get complacent, because then if it's not this feeling, it's going to be the feeling of disappointment.
Actually, I can't remember who said it, but within the last 3 days, I heard this and like it resonated with me. That somebody was being interviewed and he had said, the question was, what do you do when you reach the mountaintop? Mm-hmm. And when you reach the mountaintop, you look at the next one. And I was like, oh, that's how I feel in words. Yeah. I've just never been able to put it in words. Yeah. Because I always said, you work hard to get to the mountaintop, but then you have to work 10 times harder to stay there.
Yeah.
But I just heard, I was like, I like that one better.
Well, and it's like the idea that it's like a self-representation thing. Like, the only person you're trying to be better than is you. Once you get to this level, you are like the looking glass, right? Matthew McConaughey said it best, where I have short-term goals, but the goals are, what is the person I want to see in a year? What is the person I want to see? What is the Matthew McConaughey that I want to see in a year? What is the Matthew McConaughey that I want to see in 5 years? He's not saying I want to be Denzel Washington in 5 years. He's saying I just want to be a better version of myself. So whatever way that I can. So it's the same way with the idea of looking at a mountaintop, right? Where you can think of it as, oh, you made it. But at the same time, you're going to be having these challenges your whole life, right? There's going to be plenty of challenges. So you have to take yourself as, okay, I just need to be better than the person I was yesterday. And that person needs to be better than you.
It doesn't, all the change and improvement doesn't have to happen overnight.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think it's hyper-focused when you look at a solo sport like boxing, tennis, MMA, like where that kind of idea of like self-criticizing is taken to a whole new level, because there's no one else you can blame if you lose. If I'm on a team where there's 10 other guys, I can easily say the plays weren't drawn out for us, or like this guy wasn't defending well, or like that guy took the wrong. So there's a lot of scapegoating I can do, but when you look at that, it's definitely for a benefit that you can look at that and then be like, oh, okay, this is way easier to prepare, because I know what's going to be right for me. And then I go into it, I'm putting my best foot forward. And if I don't make it through there, I know I did the best job I can. And it's all just like a learning.
Like I said earlier, like we know when I step through the ropes, I know if I am 100% physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually prepared.
Exactly.
Right? I know. Right. I know whether I am or if I'm not.
Yeah.
And then if I'm not, then the fight's either going to be 10 times harder than it should be. And I still might pull off the win, but I still made it harder for myself.
Yes.
Like when you step through the ropes knowing that you're fully prepared, then then again, it just circles back to, you just have to trust your training and trust yourself.
Of course. I want to go through 2 more things, and then we're going to wrap up this wonderful interview.
Sure.
The first thing is, when you look at such a grueling sport and fight camps and this and that, and how dynamic it is of how much you need to dial it in, and then how much you have that, okay, the monkey's off my back, like I can relax. But what does that look like with you in terms of this work-life balance? Like, it's not like a typical 9-to-5 job. Like, the money can be there, but sometimes it's not, right? So it's like, what does that look like? And like, how do you balance like still having a good kind of personal life and doing that on top of knowing when you have to focus? Do you like meditate?
To be honest, it's the support system I have around me. Like, my boyfriend, Trevor, is 100% supportive of my career, and he gets it. Mm-hmm. He gets that when I'm in training camp that I need to do X, Y, and Z, and he doesn't ever hold it over my head. He doesn't make me feel guilty about it.
Right.
No, for 8 weeks, she needs to do this.
Yeah.
And this is what she needs from me.
Exactly.
And he does it. Like, they know, they're like, oh, Kandi's in training camp. She's probably not going to want to come
for drinks.
She's not going to come to this festival with us or anything like that. But
exactly.
Then and they don't just cut me off completely.
They're just like,
they
no,
find
we get
other ways. Yeah, they just find other ways to hang out with me when I'm in training camp type thing. If I'm in camp, I got to be home and be in bed by 9:30, and they're like, okay, do you have time for a walk? Let's go for a walk on Tuesday night.
That's amazing.
Or something after training. I've surrounded myself with people that are 100% behind me. They support me in what I want to do with my career, and they don't interfere. And their feelings don't get hurt when I can't come to certain things, or they know I'm not going to be available to do.
And it definitely
do something
probably makes the training a lot smoother too, because then that's not on the back of your mind. You can generally be like, okay, time to lock it in. Which is fantastic, and good for you for being able to surround yourself with that type of, because some people, they don't know how to control that, right? They don't know how to protect their energy, where they keep a lot of grifters around them, or just people that aren't there for very selfish reasons. So good on you for being able to like identify
what it takes.
They're like, why are you here for 4?
Come on.
Yeah.
We're 30. We don't go to bed at 9:30.
Exactly. Like, and then you're like you don't see the vision. They're like, you just don't see it, right?
You don't know what I've done all day today.
Exactly. Because I always tell people at work where they're like, why would you spend your days interviewing people? And you just go, you don't see what I'm seeing. I don't hate you or whatever. You just need to be over there. You can't be in the circle because now you're fucking with my energy. I can't have you fucking with my energy. So you just do whatever you're doing behind that door. Thank you very much.
Over there, leave me alone.
I'm not upset. I don't care that you feel the way you feel. It has nothing to do with me. But I just don't have the time. I got shit to do. But, and this is my last question before we end this. What's like your future aspirations? Now that you have this title, what does it look like for you? Are there any specific opponents that have called you out, or is there any next in line opponent that you know that's going to be coming up through the ranks, or is there's one that's ranked like that is owed a shot? How does that look like for you?
So, as far as I know, I haven't been called out by anybody. I'm not on social media a lot, but I'm pretty confident in saying I've never been. I'm actually campaigning at a new weight. So I won my title at welterweight, but I've been campaigning at junior welterweight for my last 3 fights.
Okay.
So the goal is a world title at junior welterweight. Ooh. So names in that category are Chantel Cameron. She's the champion. I'm not going to attempt her name. She's a French woman.
Right.
Hang on. Let's see if I can find her here. I've got BoxRec pulled up. Oh, Sam Worthington. Okay. She's another junior welterweight. She's ranked number 4 on BoxRec right now.
Okay.
And this French woman, if she ends up hearing this, because I'm going to butcher her name, but it's like Elhem McCallid.
Okay.
There's a Canadian, Marie Pierre Houli. Again, French. I'm sorry if I ruined your name. But yeah, so those would be 3. Especially the Canadian, right? Like, why wouldn't Canadians be fighting? But yeah, at this new weight, the end goal is world title. Want to be a world champion. Junior welterweight.
Or would that be more of an international bout?
I hope we'd be able to make it happen in Canada. Yeah. Out east, I think it's Montreal, where the Tiger management is. Marie is from Quebec. So if we ever end up fighting, it'll probably be in Quebec.
That's awesome. Yeah, again, I'd like to really thank you for coming, letting me interview you. I think it's super inspiring to be able to sit on camera next to people that have been through just crazy experiences and something where you're like, oh, no fucking way. That's crazy. Yeah. That's awesome. I think it's great. Myself, the people that I have on this team are going to be following you, championing you. That's what we do here. We to make sure we prop people up and use our reach as much as we can to get some shameless promotion out for all our guests. Is there anything that you want to send off the show with? Anything you have that you want to say to any of the guests? Any finishing words?
Thank you. Thanks, Emily, for making this connection.
Yeah.
It's really awesome when stuff comes full circle.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Anybody that was listening, thank you. I appreciate everybody that supports me. It's hard to put into words.
100%.
But
yeah,
I'm very grateful.
We are concluding episode 10, maybe episode
9, 10.
10. Thank you so much. And don't forget to check our channel for those watching. See you next